Out of courtesy, the billionaire CEO attended a charity performance, but when two young girls took the stage and sang a song that broke his heart, everything changed. Soft music, clinking glasses, and the courteous laughing of contributors who had come to show off rather than to show their hearts filled the room. With an unopened glass of champagne in his hand, Adam Rivers stood close to the rear of the grand ballroom, already figuring out how quickly he might get out of there unseen. Appearances were more important than the cause at these charity events. He had given liberally, more than everyone else in the room, yet he disliked recognition and socializing. His black suit was perfectly fitted, his light brown hair was styled, and his deep brown eyes looked around the room with a slight sense of disinterest. His only reason for being here was duty. The host took the microphone and announced a special performance just as he was ready to walk away from the platform and go quietly. The host announced that two little sisters will be performing to raise money for children's medical needs. Adam hardly noticed, it was merely background noise. However, he felt a jolt when two young females stepped out hand in hand as the spotlight hit the stage. Their ages could not have exceeded 6 years. Their long brown hair fell gently about their faces as they donned matching white outfits. They appeared to pierce right through him with their warm, broad, and terribly familiar eyes. Adam stayed motionless as the music started and they began to sing, oblivious to everyone else in the room. The girls' voices were lovely and pure, innocent yet powerful, and they had a natural harmony. Adam was unable to concentrate on anything else as the people surrounding him became more subdued, and some even wiped away their tears. Their faces, their eye shapes, chin tilts, and the somewhat unusual manner one of them tapped her foot were all clearly related to something, or rather, someone, in his past. He leaned forward a little, as though he were drawing nearer to a reality he had not yet come to terms with. Then he caught sight of her. A woman with a face he hadn't seen in 6 years and a familiar posture stood alone off to the side of the stage, her hands clenched tightly in front of her. Even though she had darker hair and a more worn-out face, he could still identify her anywhere. Cassie. The woman who had abruptly and mysteriously disappeared from his life. The woman who was everything at one point. His body was already responding as his mind attempted to make sense of what he was witnessing. His heart thumped. He was unable to breathe. Not just any performers were the girls on stage, singing like tiny stars. She owned them. And they were also his if his intuition was correct and his features were reflected in their faces. He waited for a round of applause. With his mind racing and his stomach in knots, he turned and hurried out of the ballroom as soon as the last note sounded and the audience exploded in applause. The past he believed to be dead had suddenly appeared on a stage and met his eyes directly. Furthermore, nothing in his life, not even a contract, a title, or an empire, could have prepared him for that. Adam's heart continued to race as he stood by himself in the hallway outside the ballroom. As the understanding hit him like breaking waves, he braced his palms on the marble-top drinks table and tried to center himself. Not only did those girls resemble him, they were him. Smaller, brighter, more innocent reflections of his face. Cassie as well. Everything was validated by her presence. He hadn't seen her since the week she departed, the week she broke up with him without saying anything or giving a reason. No texts, no calls, no resolution. She had just disappeared from his life one day, and she remained concealed in spite of all of his connections and influence. Then all of a sudden she was here, and she wasn't by herself. He thought about leaving for a time. It would be simpler. Cleaner. However, he was recalcitrant. He had lived his entire life avoiding trouble, converting pain into stillness and emotion into reason. Not this time, though. He was unable to leave what he had witnessed on that platform. He had no desire to do so. Without hesitation, he headed back toward the ballroom doors and waited in the shadows just outside until the girls vanished backstage and the crowd thinned. After a few minutes, he witnessed her come out, guiding the girls to the exit while placing a protective hand on each of their tiny backs. Cassie's face was more gaunt, she was thinner than he remembered, and she moved with a subdued desperation that comes from living too long in survival mode. However, she still possessed the same poise and understated power that had drew him to her years before. He watched her hesitate as their eyes locked as she took a step closer. The girls were unaware. They skipped forward, discussing sparkles and cookies with one another. At first, Cassie remained silent. Her eyes widened in shock, and her lips parted slightly as though her breath had been stolen. Adam approached her cautiously until they were just a few feet apart. They simply stared at one another for a while, the air between them being so dense that neither could breathe. "You left," he murmured in a quiet, controlled voice that was slightly wavering. "Without saying anything, you vanished. I find you here now. Alongside them." He turned away from the girls. He was unable to. He would be broken. Cassie took a deep breath. "I thought I would never see you again." She spoke steadily yet softly. "I was at a loss for words. Do they belong to me?" In his mouth, the words seemed alien, like if they were someone else's. She cast her gaze downward. Indeed. He was not surprised by the response. The pain in his chest just got worse. "Cassie, why didn't you tell me? How come you wouldn't give them to me?" She felt a mixture of remorse and sadness in her eyes. "Adam, because you were establishing an empire. Your largest acquisition had just been completed. You put in 20 hours a day at work. You informed me that nothing more could be done. I thought you were real." She hesitated. "I felt afraid. I didn't want to cause you any distractions. Or destroyed the hard work you put in." Adam's voice was harsh as he gently shook his head. "Nothing was ruined by you. Everything was taken by you." Cassie took a small step forward and spoke in a clear but quiet voice. "Chloe, one of them, is ill. Surgery is necessary for her. We were here tonight for that reason. To earn enough money to support her. I tried everything else." In startled stillness, he gazed at her. Anger, remorse, and helplessness were among the thousand feelings that rushed through him. But there was something more powerful below it all. Willpower. "Where do you stay?" he inquired. She paused. "A friend's house. Not that far." He said, "I want to see them. I'm curious about them." Cassie gave a slow nod. "All right. But move slowly. They have no knowledge." He glanced in the direction of the entrance where the females had vanished. "It's time for them to do so." The air was chilly and peaceful as Cassie guided Adam down a quiet residential street that twisted away from the city's glow. The only rhythm between them as they strolled in silence was the tapping of their shoes on the sidewalk. Unaware of the tension traveling behind them, Cassie would look over her shoulder every few steps to make sure the girls were still ahead, laughing and skipping. Adam initially avoided contact, uncertain of what he was permitted to feel, much less express. Questions, recollections, and feelings that had not come to the surface in years were racing through his head. It felt like opening a time capsule that had been buried too deep to see Cassie again. It was like meeting the future he had never been promised was his when he saw the girls, his daughters. They arrived at a humble home nestled behind a line of towering bushes. It wasn't elegant, but it was well maintained. The girls rushed in as Cassie opened the front door. She called after them, "Go wash up. Before going to bed, we'll drink tea." The girls' laughter echoed down the hallway as they rushed off. In Adam's ears, the sound was loud and lovely, like thunder and song. Waiting for him to enter, Cassie stood in a little foyer. He paused at the doorway as though he was worried that passing through it would make everything irrevocable. However, he moved onward. The house was calm, cozy, and replete with remnants of the life he had lost. A partially completed puzzle on the coffee table, children's shoes beside the door, and drawings on the refrigerator. It was all so personal, yet simultaneously familiar and unfamiliar. He shook his head when Cassie offered him tea. He didn't want to act as though this was commonplace. He broke the stillness by asking, "When did you find out Chloe was sick?" She rested against the doorway of the kitchen. "A year or so ago. It began with exhaustion and shortness of breath. A cardiologist was seen by us. It is a birth defect. Fixable but costly. The type of operation that requires a lengthy recuperation period and a specialist." She lowered her gaze to her hands. "I was unable to pay for it. Tonight's fundraising was a final attempt." There was a change in his chest, a steadily increasing pressure that had nowhere to go. "Then why didn't you give me a call?" "It's not about us. Only about her. You knew I would assist." "Honestly, I didn't know that," she said. "I was unsure about your response after all this time. I didn't say anything after everything." With his fingers grazing the border of a framed picture featuring 3 stick figures and a rainbow, Adam turned away and headed down the corridor. There was no writing of his name. Naturally, it wasn't. This was not a tale about him. Not till today. "Are they aware of me?" he inquired. "No," Cassie said, becoming silent once more. "They are aware of a father, but they do not know who it is. I simply omitted the information, I didn't lie. I didn't want them to think about someone who might not return." Adam's jaw tightened. "Right now, I'm not leaving." Cassie didn't soften or smile. "That's what I want to think." At that moment, the girls returned to the room wearing matching pajamas adorned with tiny yellow stars. With a picture book in hand, Chloe clambered onto the couch, and Emma approached Adam without trepidation. "You attended our concert," she replied casually. "I noticed you observing us." He dropped down to her level. "Indeed. I was present. Both of you sang really well." Her eyes sharpened as she examined him, intrigued, almost suspicious. "Are you friends with Mommy?" He paused. Behind them, Cassie held her breath. With caution, he said, "I hope I can be your friend too." Emma thought about that. "All right. You will need to learn the secret handshake, though. Additionally, Chloe must first like you." A delicate, strange smile appeared on his face as he smiled for the first time. "Deal." Adam watched the girls' slow, even breathing in the corridor outside their bedroom after tea, bedtime tales, and grudging goodnights. Emma's hand was hanging off the bed, and Chloe was holding a plush animal. He turned to Cassie, who was standing next to him with her arms crossed and a look of exhaustion that only moms can have. "You did a good job raising them," he said. "I tried my best," she said. "It shouldn't have been your only responsibility." Unsure of what to say, she stared at him. He said, "I can't change the past. However, I wish to contribute to their future. Whatever that appears to be." And Cassie didn't back down for the first time that evening. She only gave a nod. "Then begin by showing up tomorrow." He was certain that he would. The following morning arrived gently, with the living room painted a bright gold as sunshine streamed through the transparent curtains. Adam had hardly slept at all, spending the majority of the night on Cassie's guest room's little pull-out couch, gazing up at the ceiling as his thoughts would not stop. He felt alienated in a world he so badly wanted to be a part of for the first time in his life. The house was already awake when he got up. From the kitchen came the smell of pancakes and something sweet, perhaps cinnamon or syrup, and laughter. Following the noises, he discovered Cassie using one hand to flip pancakes, Emma sitting at the coloring station, and Chloe standing next to her mother, intently observing the pan. It appeared easy, organic, like a life with rhythms he had never experienced. However, Emma's eyes glowed and she leaped out of her chair as soon as she saw him. "You returned," she said, sprinting to give him a leg hug. Adam stooped, simultaneously astonished and appreciative. He smoothed her hair and added, "Of course I did. I promised to." Chloe glanced over, more reserved, more cautious. Her gaze lingered on him as though she was attempting to determine his place in the world. After giving her the spatula, Cassie moved to stand beside him. She muttered to herself, "She's slower to trust." "It has always been." Adam gave a nod. "She is not required to trust me immediately. All she needs to know is that I'm not going anywhere." They all sat down to eat after he assisted in setting the table. Adam wasn't sure how to move in this new area, so it was awkward at first, but the girls didn't seem to mind. Between pancake bites, Emma spoke endlessly about cartoons, school, and a buddy who kept a pet lizard. Adam saw how Chloe watched everything, including him, but she spoke little. She was watching, figuring, trying to figure out who he was and why he had come all of a sudden. Cassie scrubbed the dishes after breakfast while the girls went to get dressed. Beside her, Adam dried them in silence, both of them conscious of the odd cadence they were starting to adopt. Her voice was calm yet confident when she eventually spoke. "You're going to stick around?" He gave a nod. "Yes, I am." "How long?" "As long as I'm allowed to." "For however long you want." She took a while to respond. "I don't usually lend a hand. It's difficult to let someone in because I've spent so much time alone with them." He put a spotless dish on the counter and remarked, "I don't want to take anything away from what you've built. All I want to do is participate." It was an odd sort of trial run for something like a family, and they spent the remainder of the day together. Adam played pretend with the girls, a sort of space mission/princess rescue game, and he started laughing, really laughing, in a way that seemed strange and long overdue. Chloe did not pull away when she unintentionally bumped into him and he grabbed her. "You no longer feel like a stranger," she whispered softly as she glanced up at him. Then he felt a constriction in his chest. Being a stranger was not what he desired. Never again. Adam watched the girls sleep in the doorway that night after they had been tucked in. With her arms crossed across her chest, Cassie approached him. She said that no one else had ever been here. Not at all. Nobody stayed. His words was no more than a whisper as he gazed at her. "I'm going to stay." Unconvinced but not so much that she pushed him away, she glanced up at him. And he didn't feel like he was taking someone else's life for the first time. He seemed to be starting his own. The days that followed fell into an odd, loving rhythm that neither Cassie nor Adam had anticipated. Adam would get up before the girls every morning, sometimes assisting Cassie with breakfast and other times just observing her walk through the kitchen with a poise and comfort he hadn't noticed. Chloe only purposefully wore mismatched socks, Emma preferred syrup on everything, and both kids maintained that waffles tasted better when eaten on the floor. He started to pick up minor but important details. None of it was questioned by him. He just merged with them, moment by moment, integrating himself into the life he had been missing for so long. Though careful, Chloe was no longer aloof. She would quiz him about himself rather than his history. Which animal was his favorite? Did he enjoy rainy weather? Was he able to whistle? The bridge she was constructing between them seemed to grow stronger with each response. She showed him one of her sketches one afternoon, which showed 3 stick figures beneath a tree, 2 small ones holding hands and a taller one in the center. "This is us," she murmured timidly. "If you desire it." Fearing that his voice would crack, he remained silent for a minute. He only responded, "I do," and nodded. Adam also started to spend more time with Cassie, but not in a demanding or coercive manner. Although he respected the limits she had set, he felt they were starting to change. After the girls went to bed, they continued to converse long into the night, sometimes about the years that had passed between them and sometimes about the future, which seemed to be filled with a void neither of them could fill. Cassie explained to him how difficult it had been, how she had worked late into the night and skipped meals to ensure the girls had enough, and how numerous times she had nearly called him while staring at her phone. He listened without interjecting, allowing her to express what she had long suppressed. "I never wanted to do it alone, Adam," Cassie confessed to him one evening as they sat on the porch watching the girls chase fireflies in the last of the light. "All I was afraid about was that you wouldn't want this. Any of it." He didn't turn his head. At the time, I had no idea what I desired. I believed that the only thing that counted was success. However, it isn't. Not even close. She looked into his eyes with cautious optimism. That's what you mean. Every word, he answered. While the girls were playing in the yard the following day, Adam answered a call from the hospital. After reviewing Chloe's case, the physician suggested surgery shortly. Everything could be scheduled within the week because of Adam's persistence and connections, and the timing was perfect. Cassie was momentarily silent as he told her, her eyes welling with tears. She said, "You really did it. She was saved by you." Adam shook his head in response, "No. You did. You stood up for her. I'm just now doing what I ought to have done all along." That evening, they got down with the girls and used tactful, polite language to describe the surgery. Adam could see the terror in Chloe's eyes, but she nodded boldly. Taking her hand, he assured her that he would be there all the way. After giving him a long look, she said, "Okay. However, only if you also bring my bear." Adam waited outside the girls' room that night, listening to the lullabies and whispering goodnights as Cassie put them to bed. He carried the burden of lost years and the promise of future ones, feeling simultaneously like a father and a stranger. And he noticed something softening and altering in Cassie's eyes as she entered the hallway and looked him in the eye. Not quite yet, not forgiving. However, something tangible. Adam felt deserving of the title he had never dared to claim, Dad, for the first time in a long time. As though the world itself recognized the gravity of the day, the morning of the surgery arrived with a gray sky and a calm atmosphere. It was evident to Adam that Cassie had not slept well the previous night. No one was hungry for breakfast because they were moving about the kitchen like ghosts. Chloe sat at the table, her tiny fingers clenched around the worn paw of her plush bear, which she held to her bosom. Emma remained beside her sister, abnormally silent, observing her every action as if she would disappear. Cassie made an effort to smile while saying kind words of support, but Adam could see the dread beneath her composed demeanor. All he could do was be there, totally, and without interruption. He wished he could take it from her and carry it all himself. He was cautious to speak steadily as he assisted Chloe into her small coat when it came time to go. "Will it hurt?" she whimpered as she raised her large brown eyes to meet his. With a hand on her shoulder, he knelt next to her. "To be honest," he said, "maybe a little. But when you wake up, we'll be right there. Following that, things will improve. I swear." The only sounds during the silent trip to the hospital were the engine's gentle hum and the occasional phrase that was murmured from the rear seat. Chloe's hand was held by Cassie the entire time. Adam was driving with white knuckles, constantly glancing at Chloe's face and paying more attention to the rearview mirror than the road. She would occasionally look into his eyes and give him a little, apprehensive grin, as though she were attempting to reassure him rather than the other way around. The hospital personnel was welcoming and friendly, trying to make the sterile setting less intimidating. Chloe showed more bravery than anyone could have predicted from someone so little. She kept her bear close, answered questions calmly, and only stumbled when the nurse announced it was time to leave. She looked to Adam and Cassie, her eyes wide, her bottom lip quivering. "When I wake up, you'll be here," she said. Adam took her hand and nodded instantly. "No, we're not leaving." They watched as she vanished along the corridor, her bear nestled beneath her arm, her petite frame engulfed by the big doors and the medical gown. The silence was intolerable once she was gone. Cassie buried her face in her hands and fell into the closest chair. Without saying anything, Adam sat next to her and put his arm around her shoulders. She instinctively leaned into him for the first time since they had been together. He tightened his grip on her as he felt her breath tremble and her tears seep into his shirt. Hours went by in a blur of coffee in the waiting room, quick updates, and excruciating silence. Adam did everything he could to prevent his thoughts from slipping into panic, including reading emails and browsing the news. However, nothing was helpful. He jumped each time the door opened, his stomach churning and his thoughts anticipating the worst. Upon the arrival of the doctor, Adam and Cassie stood simultaneously, holding their breath. Weary but comforting, the surgeon grinned. He remarked she did a fantastic job. There were no complications from the surgery. Everything appears to be going well, although she will need some time to recover. Cassie started crying. With a sigh of relief so profound it left him lightheaded, Adam sat back down as his legs began to fail. Adam could hardly hear the doctor as he went on to discuss follow-up appointments, medication, and post-operative care. He could only think that she was all right. They were permitted to see her later. In the hospital bed, Chloe appeared quite tiny, her face pallid, her breathing steady but slow. Emma silently stood next to her, grasping her sister's hand. Cassie mumbled something Adam couldn't hear while brushing the hair off Chloe's forehead. Chloe's eyelids then opened, allowing her to survey the space. Adam caught her eye. In a raspy whisper, she said, "You stayed." He smiled and took a step forward. "I did, of course." With a feeble smile, she said, "Did you bring my bear?" Gently he set it down next to her, holding it up. "I will always be able to see it." With a nod, she closed her eyes once again and fell back asleep, reassured that she was safe. Long after Cassie and Emma had returned home to sleep, Adam lingered in the hospital chair next to her bed that night. He listened to the gentle beat of her heart, watched the monitors blink, and knew that everything had changed in a matter of days. Boardroom meetings, deadlines, and corporate victories no longer characterized him as a man. He has a father. And he would never again leave. Although it took longer than anticipated, Chloe's recuperation was steady. She drifted between lengthy sleeps and peaceful times with books and soothing cartoons on TV during her stay in the hospital. Her sharp wit and quiet power won over the nurses, who loved her. Adam divided his time between working only what was absolutely required and being in that room, helping in every way he could, while Cassie was always by her side, hovering with a steady voice and loving hand. He held Chloe's hand when the drugs caused her to feel ill or exhausted, brought her puzzles in the afternoon, and read to her in the mornings. She called him Dad without hesitation. One morning, while he was changing her cover, it had slid out. He had almost frozen, his heart stopping in his throat as she whispered it drowsily. Afraid to frighten the word away, he remained silent at the time, but it reverberated in his chest like the warmest thunder for the remainder of the day. Cassie witnessed that gradual, indisputable change as well. She had known a man whose world revolved around control, who lived in fancy suits and had strict timetables. However, the man who suddenly sat next to their daughter's hospital bed was different. He had heavy circles under his eyes and wrinkled clothes, and he was whispering jokes and sweeping hair off of a young girl's face. Softer. True. When Chloe was taken away for follow-up scans, she observed him intently, trying to make sense of the guy he had formerly been and the one who now sought for her hand. At first, she remained silent. The change had been hardest for Emma. She had remained with a neighbor during the hospital nights and had become more reclusive, uncertain of her role now that Adam seemed to revolve around her and Chloe got all the attention. She refused to talk to Adam one evening when he returned home from the hospital to see how she was doing. She refused to glance up as she sat on her room's floor, silently braiding her doll's hair. He waited while kneeling next to her. "You're Chloe's father now," she muttered after a while. "Not my." Adam's heart fell. It made perfect sense, but he hadn't expected her to say it. She saw that he had picked the girl in the hospital, Chloe, who most needed him. But, in a different way, Emma also needed him. "I know it feels that way," he murmured, meeting her eyes. "However, I am also yours. If you'd like me to." Unconvinced, she blinked at him. "I'm not ill, though. I don't require assistance." Gently, he took her hand. "That does not imply that you are unimportant. I missed our time together just as much. I also wish to make that up. Not with Chloe alone. Both of you." Still uncertain, she glanced at him. Will you then attend my school play the following week? Even though you're still needed by Chloe? He made no hesitation. I'll be in the front row there. Then she started to soften once more. She handed him a picture of a house with 4 inhabitants done in vibrant colors after asking him to assist her with a drawing. With meticulous lettering, she had named them all, Daddy, Emma, Chloe, and Mommy. He couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry when he saw it. She laughed and thought he was squeezing too hard, but he just pulled her up and gave her a hug. When they returned to the hospital, Chloe was becoming stronger. She sat up more frequently, demanded pancakes, and asked when she could go home because her cheeks were red again. She jumped with joy in bed when the doctors eventually gave her the all-clear to go home, asking to use Adam's car rather than Cassie's. He acted as though he was surprised. What? Unlike your mom's car, mine isn't covered with stickers and cracker crumbs. She chuckled. I wish to enter yours because of this. As Cassie carefully packed their belongings, she observed Adam assisting Chloe in putting on her shoes. As if it were the most normal thing in the world, this man who had previously disappeared from her life was now folding hospital discharge paperwork, putting a stuffed bear under his daughter's arm, and learning prescription schedules by heart. Something she had boarded up long ago began to split open inside of her. Back at home that evening, Cassie and Adam sat together in the living room after the girls had gone to sleep and the house had become silent. Her head leaned back on the couch, but her eyes were steady and awake despite her fatigue. You really stayed, she muttered. He said, I meant it. She looked in his direction. I assumed I would have to handle everything by myself. I readied myself for it. However, you're present. Not hurriedly, but as if he had just realized how brittle trust could be, he sought for her hand. And I'm not going anywhere. She didn't pull away this time. She allowed their fingers to entwine. Furthermore, it didn't feel like forgiveness when she rested her head on his shoulder. It was like starting over. The ensuing week seemed to be a silent miracle. With every day bringing more energy, more laughter, and fewer reminders of how close things had come to the brink, Chloe's recovery was gradual but steady. Morning television, mismatched socks, and pleas for pancakes at strange hours filled the house once more. Both the turmoil and the ecstasy persisted. Adam found it surprisingly easy to get used to. He was no longer merely a guest. He was familiar with the cadence of their mornings, the lexicon of Emma's emotions, and the distinction between Chloe's proud and shy smiles. He was aware of the books they preferred to read before bed and when Cassie needed to stare quietly rather than talk. Awkward moments persisted, tiny traces of the time they had spent apart. Adam occasionally found himself spending too much time staring at old family pictures, experiencing the pain of being gone from the place where he should have been. However, the pain would subside into something milder when Emma would put her hand in his while out for a stroll or Chloe would tug on his sleeve to show him a fresh drawing. Cassie had also become quieter, more thoughtful rather than aloof, as if she were gradually undoing all the lessons she had learned about not depending on others. She had served as a stronghold for a long time, and now she had a companion who was there to support her rather than try to break in. The girls put up a makeshift restaurant in the living room one Sunday afternoon, complete with mismatched kitchenware and menus scrawled on notepads. Their lone patron, Adam, sat obediently at their makeshift table as Emma attempted to overcharge him for water-based lemonade and Chloe served illusory spaghetti. Grinning and with her arms folded casually across her chest, Cassie observed from the corridor. Something between them that had never existed before, assurance, passed when he looked up and met her gaze. Adam discovered Cassie standing at the kitchen window, gazing out into the yard where moonlight touched the tops of the grass. Later that night, after the girls had gone to bed and the toy dishes had been put back on the shelves. Not wanting to ruin the moment, he came up discreetly. She spoke without turning around. I never thought we'd get here, she remarked. For years, I believed it would be just the two of us. I told myself that was sufficient. That I was sufficient. Adam stood next to her, gazing out at the same scene. He claimed you were more than sufficient. They were spared by you. You were able to save yourself. Out of nothing, you created an existence for them. All I'm doing now is attempting to deserve it. Her eyes were filled with emotion, but not fear, as she turned to face him. You are, she whispered. That night, they didn't talk much more, but something had changed between them once more, as if the last piece of a long unfinished project had finally fallen into place. In the weeks that followed, Adam gradually made his presence known rather than using bags or showy displays. A beloved mug that started to appear in the dishwasher, a jacket hanging by the door, and a toothbrush left in the bathroom. Naturally, the girls noticed, and Cassie just grinned and turned to face Adam when they inquired as to whether Daddy would be staying forever. He responded on their behalf. Indeed. If you'll allow me. They didn't have a great existence overnight. Long nights, sudden fevers, forgotten munches, and times when the past sought to slink in between the gaps were all still present. However, there was also warmth, laughing, and the type of love that ties everything together without shouting. Months after Chloe's operation, the four of them sat on the porch and watched the sunset one calm evening. With Chloe at Cassie's side and their hands clasped together, Emma curled up in Adam's lap. There was only tranquility, no grandiose proclamations or shocking discoveries. The kind that had appeared unattainable at one point. Adam recognized that everything he had ever pursued had led him to this point as he gazed at these three individuals who had once been strangers but were now his entire world. To this veranda. To this family. To the start. This story's conclusion, in my opinion, is both emotionally deserved and incredibly fulfilling. What started off as a fortuitous meeting based on remorse and the anguish of the unknown progressively developed into a path of reconciliation, trust, and self-discovery. It's never too late to assume the role life has always intended for you, as demonstrated by Adam's journey from a distant, ambitious businessman to a present-day, caring father. Cassie demonstrates great courage and grace via her calm fortitude and readiness to welcome someone who has let her down again. And two adults who had previously lost each other are reunited by the girl's love and innocence. In addition to being a love story, this is a redemption arc encircled by honesty, family, and second chances. And occasionally, those are the most potent tales.